Greetings. In this presentation, we're going to be talking about teaching, learning, and searching in a world of generative AI. We'll explore some tips and tricks. We'll also examine concerns, and I'm going to give you a large list of resources. What we're not going to do today is look deeply under the hood of generative AI. I'll share with you a couple of videos that will get you up to speed pretty quickly, but that's not my purpose. Today, I'm going to be your librarian, and we're going to go on a fast-paced tour, and I'm going to introduce you to a very playful petting zoo, which I hope you'll explore sometime after the presentation. General Eric Shinseki says, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. And that seems like a very fitting quote for the environment that we find ourselves in right now, where the information landscape is changing daily. And as information professionals, we need to stay on top of it. You can't do that unless you have a playful attitude, accepting some of the affordances and guiding your users and patrons and students in effective, ethical, and creative use of a tool that is going to be prevalent. So this is a link to the petting zoo, which you'll have access to afterwards. And this is what it looks like in real life. And I'm going to be keeping this up so you won't have to. It's a big job, but I'm excited about some of the changes and improvements that I see every day. So today we're going to share a little bit of background relating to the growth and the prevalence of generative AI. We'll talk about the buckets of tools in which these platforms seem to fit. And we'll introduce the notion of academic honesty conversations, guidelines, and sample policy statements that we might need to use in our libraries and our classrooms. So basically, what is generative AI? It's a branch of artificial intelligence that uses machine learning algorithms to create new content. And we can create text, images, video, sounds, code, and calculations, and who knows what's next. We need to know that it learns from a large data set of examples and uses the knowledge to generate new content. One of my favorite thought leaders, Ethan Mollick from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, shares, there is a light at the end of the AI tunnel for educators, but it will require experiments and adjustments. In the meantime, we need to be realistic about how many things are about to change in the near future and start to plan now for what we will do in response to what people are calling the homework apocalypse. That's actually Mollick's term. He says fall is coming, but I think we are preparing and adjusting as this tool grows because it's still in its nascent state. Some of the concerns that we are facing with generative AI is the authority and the accuracy of information, the fact that a lot of information doesn't appear because it's behind paywalls. We're concerned about the provenance of information and media that are being developed, hallucinations or nonsense that sometimes shows up in the output. We're looking at intellectual property ethics in new ways, and there are many court cases currently underway. We're looking at where is information coming from? Are the citations that may be included or may not be included faulty or made up? What's not included in generated results and syntheses? Who owns data? If we're entering data into these tools, does our own data remain private or is it being used as training? Who is behind the algorithm? Is there bias in the output? How diverse the data? Will bad actors be using AI to create content and manipulate events, for instance, elections? What content is being used for training? And will it replace human jobs, diminish student agency, voice, and innovation, or will it discourage? And will we have to worry about the notion of deep fakes abounding as these tools can simulate voice and video and gestures? Lots of things to be concerned about. And I want you to keep in mind two statements or phrases or adages as we do think about these things. Both come from the computer world, the IT world. keep the human in the loop, and we should do that as we make evaluations about these tools, as we use them, as we input data, as we create our own tools based on the large language models. We should also keep in mind GIGO, or garbage in, garbage out. Some of the results we're going to get are only as good as the prompts that we include in a way similar to search terms. And also the materials that are input into these applications that we're using may not present valuable syntheses or results as we look at them. So keep these two adages in mind as you examine and evaluate the new materials we're seeing in the new platforms. In fact, there have been a number of women leaders in this area who have spoken out. This is an article that appeared in a Rolling Stone issue from summer 2023. And these are writers, professors, IT specialists, leaders in the world of algorithms, machine learning, and AI. And they were interviewed for this article, and they specifically discussed Dr. Gabru's paper, where she suggests that white supremacist, misogynist, and ageist views are overrepresented in the training data, not only exceeding their prevalence in the general population, but also setting up models trained on data sets to further amplify biases and harms. She goes on, there were no Black people, literally no Black people, who were born and raised in Ethiopia. I would go to academic conferences in AI and I would see 4 or 5 Black people out of 5, 6, 7,000 people internationally. I saw who was building AI systems and their attitudes and their points of view. I saw what they were being used for, and I was like, oh my God, we have a problem. On the other hand, we're seeing really important uses of AI in many fields, including the sciences and health. In fact, a couple of studies recently emerged that demonstrated that AI tools could help detect more cancers from mammograms. And you may want to take a look at some of these studies. We're also seeing that there's potentially a new digital divide emerging. A piece from the Brookings Institute written by Michael Trocaro suggested the third digital divide was the one in which the rich have access to both technology and the people to help them use it, while the poor have access to the technology only. And I think this points to the role of the librarian as a leader in working with people to better understand and discover the potential creative and ethical uses and the productive uses of AI, and to ensure that information that our users get is reliable and that they understand the drawbacks and the potential for uses of generative AI. Our students will have to work symbiotically with AI tools. So whether you're an educator, a librarian, a parent, anyone who works with young people, or anyone who's looking at the changes in the environment, you'll understand that these are part of our lives. It's a given. And we'll need to think about with our users, how is AI literacy connected to the other literacies that we are engaged with? Information literacy, media literacy, news literacy, data literacy, global literacy, and of course, digital literacy. Folks are saying that AI literacy is becoming an essential and becoming much more pervasive. It's connected to those other literacies. And across the literature that I've been reading, I was able to develop a synthesized definition. And basically, AI literacy is about understanding the basic concepts and technologies used by AI, critically evaluating AI platforms and systems and their outputs for accuracy and bias, using AI to responsibly discover, solve problems, and co-create, using AI to communicate effectively about AI with others, and considering the ethical implications of AI on creativity, culture, work, politics, health, the economy, etc. AI EDU creates an awful lot of learning tools, including this one, which shows changes in the world around us in the various different industries and creative pursuits. And I encourage you to share a chart like this, especially if you're in K-12 with your students. One of the thought leaders I follow, Nicole Hennig, who is now at the University of Arizona and formerly with MIT, suggests that librarians have a strong need to educate ourselves first and then educate our users, that it is a mistake to focus mainly on issues of plagiarism, bias, and copyright and misinformation. Yes, those are important issues, but there are also many ways in which AI is helping to democratize and enable creative content generation. When you develop a broader understanding of AI literacy, you learn how solutions are being invented to address many of the ethical issues. Because of the exponential growth of the research, some of the problems we see today will be solved very soon. And so I want you to look at these elephants that we might face in our rooms, whether they're classrooms, libraries, institutions. Understand that there is an angry elephant, perhaps, or an ugly elephant that may be created using an AI art tool that gave him 3 tusks. But there's also a cool and friendly elephant. And let's see if we can focus more on that cool and friendly elephant for a little while. So there are a number of metaphors you could use to describe the use of generative AI in our lives. One that I kind of like a lot is that of a teaching assistant, an intern. That intern is always in training. That intern is my partner in instructional design, a time saver for me, a partner in my research, but I don't trust it to be independent. I know that it's still learning, and I know that I'm still the expert in my courses, and I am still the lead learner. But I don't deny the time saving and the help that I gotten in productivity by my new intern. My intern can do a whole bunch of things for me and for my students. My intern could outline a syllabus, draft my presentations, create analogies to help me understand complex issues, reduce text complexity, differentiate for students who have different learning abilities, translate documents, summarize PDFs for me, suggest teaching strategies, synthesize research, create study tools, put myself in imagine I'm a persona situation, playing devil's advocate, recommending digital resources. There's many things that intern can do for me while I resist anthropomorphizing a machine learning tool. Sometimes it helps me to understand some of the affordances of those tools. So I suggest from now on, we don't bury our heads in the sand like this ostrich, but we stand up as leaders, as information leaders, as the information landscape evolves. So these are some of the educators that are thought leaders that I follow on a regular basis. Some of them are in K-12, some of them are consultants, and some of them are academics. But I really value their work, their frequent posts, their charts, and I hope that they're useful to you as well. In addition to these blog posts and videos that these thought leaders are creating, there are free courses for you to take. One of my favorites is the modules that are presented by the Khan Academy for Teaching with AI. And so, as Ethan Mollick suggests, the only bad way to react to AI is to pretend it doesn't change anything. We are in the midst of widespread disruption. Okay, so moving forward, these are some playlists that I have created. They are on the AI Petting Zoo, and they're also embedded throughout this presentation. If you want to see more examples of some of the things I'm describing, feel free to dig into this as well as the Petting Zoo. It's important to note that the use of AI tools is not really new. Many of us have used tools that incorporate AI for a while. We've used Grammarly to help improve our grammar after we've written something. I have been fun for now a couple of years about Microsoft's tools for reading progress and also Reading Coach to help students develop fluency in their reading without stigmatizing them. I've been using Google Lens to identify plants and to translate signs in other languages when I travel. I've been using Otter AI as a tool for transcribing Zoom meetings and focus group interviews. And I use Duolingo for learning Spanish right now. And I am seeing improvements brought about by ChatGPT in that tool. Let's first take a look at the large language models for search and research. This is a screenshot of the AI search tools playlist, which you're welcome to dig in deeper on, but I'll show you a few examples. First, we want to know ChatGPT is probably the most popular example of a large language model, and most of us discovered it in November 2022. It's important to know where it's taking its data from. It is taking its data from the English language version of Wikipedia, from a crawler called Common Crawl, and it explored internet data through mid-2021. It's taking its data from web pages that were shared in Reddit posts that had, or pages that had at least 3 upvotes, from 2 internet-based sets of books. Now, it is not really clear. They've been called Books 1 and Books 2. People suggest that it relates to Project Gutenberg, Hathitrust, or the Internet Public Library. Some people suggest that Google Books is part of it. Not sure. OpenAI has not yet made public what ChatGPT 4 is trained on. It's important to note that not every large language model searches the web. In fact, most of the large language models right now don't. And so not only are we getting data in some cases that's 2021 and older, but sometimes it's not going beyond the data set to enrich the content, and that we're not getting data and content that lives behind paywalls, the stuff that librarians value in their proprietary databases. It's important to know that ChatGPT is not the only game in town. Ethan Mollick, again, has created a couple of charts on this is the 6 large language models. I believe there's probably more than 6 as I write this, but take a look at them. These comparisons are interesting, and it's important to know that you're not necessarily using the best one for any particular task. So you want to kind of make some comparisons, and we're lucky that there are people out there doing that work for us. This is another one from Malik, and in this case, he notes which ones have internet connections, which ones read files, which ones see images, and you'll see that Bard and Bing do. But this is, again, changing daily. So this is most of the large language models that existed as I created this presentation, and there are more that are coming that are based on open source tools. And here's a comparison of the 3 big ones that I feel I'm using and other people are using. I've been using the pay version, ChatGPT 4. In this case, my example was just help me get ready for the fall 2023 school semester. What are some ways I can use generative AI to help me? So note that ChatGPT 4 and Bard don't give me resources. They don't list their resources, but Bing Chat does. In this case, you can see some of the features that are emerging for these. Note that ChatGPT 4 includes the option of adding plugins. You can go to the 3 dots. I believe it's underneath the content, and you can get a code interpreter, or you can add a variety of plugins. I'll show you a screenshot of some of those options later. You'll note that Bard does visual search now. It's included its wonderful Google Lens in its results and synthesis, and you can do a lot of the identification I mentioned using that. And as I mentioned, Bing is also including sources. And so these are all getting better and better. And so in order to keep up, you probably want to read things like the Google Keyword blog, or the blogs from Microsoft, and also the blogs from the thought leaders that I shared earlier. In this case, I'm giving you an example of how ChatGPT can create content using tables. So I asked it for the benefits and drawbacks of using ChatGPT in a professional context for productivity and teaching. It did a pretty good job. And then I refined my prompt and asked it specifically to create that comparison table for elementary teaching and learning. And it did a pretty good job on that as well. These are the plugins that I mentioned that are now available in ChatGPT 4. I suspect that is going to grow. Note that some of the partners include old friends that you may use. Wolfram Alpha, the computational search engine, Kayak for travel, and Expedia for travel. But you can see that this is going to be growing. You can click and add these much in the same way that you add to the tools that you use in Google for fonts and for finding images. So keep an eye on those as well, because they will expand the capabilities of these large language models. Just as an example, Bard frequently has been updating, and in its recent updates, it did add that Google Lens powered image prompting. It is now integrating Adobe Firefly, which is my favorite tool for design and editing images. Actually, or creating images, actually, it's second to Canva, but it's pretty darn good. It is now available in over 40 languages and available in new areas across the world. Bard now does audible responses or audio responses in multiple languages. It has the improved ability to do code queries. It allows you to pin and rename the results that you get and to share those results with links. And it also integrates with a lot of the Google Suite tools, and you'll see that happening in Microsoft as well. To just emphasize how important this visual search is, in terms, we saw the example of the mammograms, but this one shows how Google Bard can read this visual from a cuneiform tablet and translate the Sumerian. One of the features I like about Bing AI Chat is that it allowed me to choose from among 3 or more drafts. And the first 3 are showing there. And you can imagine with these large language models and their huge data sets, it's possible to compose text in millions of different ways. And so the one that the tool thinks is the best may not be the best. And it would really be a benefit to you or any user to explore the other versions, the other drafts, the other syntheses, the other questions, to see what the variety looks like. In addition, partnerships also are coming from proprietary tools and firms. And so AI recently gave, AP, Associated Press, recently gave OpenAI access to its archive of news stories. And so in this article, they say the agreement between OpenAI and AP is watershed. It might encourage other tech firms to pay for content to train their AI algorithms. And it highlights the growing urgency of resolving the issue of content compensation in the artificial intelligence sector. And so let's look for these partnerships as they develop and as these tools improve. We are not only looking at those 6 and that growing number of large language models, we're also looking at how AI uses those models and other resources to improve search. And this is just a list of some of the search tools that I encourage you to explore and to introduce in your work with patrons, users, and students. For a few years right now, JSTOR has been introducing its text analyzer tool. So this allows you to bring an article that you find in, or an article that you wrote in, or your paper that you wrote in, and have JSTOR analyze its content to find connections across its interdisciplinary database. So I brought in a paper I wrote to find relevant, related research. And this is really a great way to begin a lit review or a resources section for a paper. And so note that in the output, I got a word cloud of topics that I can click on or unclick on. And I got a tool of scales for prioritized terms. So if I wanted to decrease the priority of a particular term in my next search, I could move that slider bar to the right or the left for each of these terms. And that gives me power as a searcher beyond that of what I would get from a generalized generative AI search, I am in charge of the results in a more powerful way here. And that's what's happening in many of these search tools. Another one of my favorites is Elicit. It is called a research assistant for using the large language models to automate the researcher's workflow. It really focuses on lit reviews. It helps you find relevant papers. It helps you combine the breadth of semantic similarity with the precision of keyword matching. And so we're looking beyond metadata and beyond the semantic web to really go deep into analysis of text content. It allows us to read summaries of abstracts or summaries of papers and to search forward and backward in a citation graph, what we called citation chaining and graphing in the past. It's allowing us to organize papers by the type of information and filtered on the basis of survey type or methodology, and to save and export our work. And so you can see on the right that there are filters, and among them are filtering for date, so we can get recent material, we can get full text only, we can get citations automatically. And these are really powerful tools for researchers that we can introduce at the high school level, I think. Another one that I really like is Perplexity. It allows us to analyze the research in a particular area, and it also gives us key ideas. Not only that, it gives us the sources of the information. So it is a search tool, and it is a way that we can find sources. This is another screenshot of Perplexity. What I did was I brought one of my papers in again, and you can see that it gave me answers. It interacted with the PDF. It also allows me to thumb up or thumb down, and the research, the tool begins to understand me in a way like Spotify understands my music taste. I like U.com. It's a little bit more general than some of the more highly academic tools. In this case, I was asking it as a student, what are the causes of the American Civil War? And so it did a very good job generalizing the causes. It also linked me to videos with a Wikipedia article. But note on the right that it selected some really good research portals for me to get started on. And so in some ways, it's kind of a hybrid. It's giving me the synthesis that a generative AI tool would give me. And it is also suggesting some good places for me to search. Note also that in the center, you see it does it will find images, videos, news, maps, so it'll look for social media, and it will also try to find code. I'm not sure what Imagine means. Absolutely worth following and exploring and introducing. Consensus is a great tool for scientific and academic research. It will find various different viewpoints that scholars are discovering and look at the consensus. What is the research saying overall? And again, you can search by years. You can put on the synthesize button, so you're getting the synthesis of the various different opinions. It's a very good place to begin a lit review. There are other scientific search engines. In this case, this is called SciSpace. It's one of those that goes across a large body of scientific papers and speeds up analysis, and again, speeds up a lit review. One of the ones that's been around for quite a while now is Semantic Scholar. It does citation analysis, which is really handy for researchers. You can sort by influential papers, by citation counts, and by how recent an article is. You can really get very quickly to who are the influential writers in an area. You can scan papers more quickly by using tilders or too long didn't read kinds of summaries. And it also has a great citation tool. And you can see that it is searching across, this is probably a little old, over 212 million papers from all fields of science. In addition to locating papers, you can also bring papers in and have discussions with them, ask ask questions of the papers so that you better understand this. This is great if you're new to a field and you don't have that context knowledge and you want to better understand words that you don't know. So you're entering a conversation and don't know what's been going on in the conversation before. So this is really helpful for understanding topics that are unfamiliar. Another one is called Scholarcy. This is another article summarizer. And you need to decide, if you're an educator, to what degree you're going to encourage reading of summaries rather than articles, or will having a summary or better summary than the writer created in the abstract, will that be useful in understanding the full PDF as somebody approaches the reading of the full text? Now let's look at instructional applications and pedagogical productivity. First, we'll take a look at strategies that use the generative AI, large language models, and then we'll look at some very specific tools in education. One thing these large language models, and this is ChatGPT-4, is really good at is discovering promising portals, web portals and directories. And so these are research portals. I imagined myself an AP history student, and I asked it to suggest some respected research portals that offer primary sources relating to the causes of the American Civil War. And it did a fine job. In fact, if I were creating the LibGuide for this project, I would start with a number of these that I was already aware of, but most of my students would not have been. And so this is a good strategy. Rather than writing the paper, it is actually leading the students to discovery of primary sources across a bunch of reliable portals. In a similar way, for the 530 class, I've asked students to create a Google programmable search using some of the best portals out there. In this case, I'm asking them to use generative AI tools to list some research portals relating to their topics, and also to test them to see if they're valuable. In this example, I'm showing how that worked for the creation of a programmable search and then later a LibGuide on yarn craft and knitting. And in this case, I did this after the student project. It turned out that many of the ones the student discovered in hours of searching, ChatGPT came up with very quickly, and also gave me annotations for them that I might actually use in or edit for my LibGuide. If you're a librarian, ChatGPT and some of these other tools can be very helpful in reader's advisory. So in this case, I tested it asking it to create an annotated list of Afrofuturist books for young adults. Then I realized, maybe I didn't want it to list just anyone. So I asked it to give me a list of award-winning Afrofuturist books for young adults. And then I asked it to create an annotated list of well-received or well-reviewed annotated Afrofuturist books for young adults. Now, in the comparison of these various prompts, I probably could put together a pretty decent list of Afrofuturist books. Now, I could use Novelist, and I could also use Teaching Books for this task, but I may not have a subscription to those. I could also use WorldCat, and I could also use my own catalog. However, one of the tricky things relating to this is that Afrofuturism or Afrofuturist is not really a subject heading that goes back very far, and I think that many people have added it to their catalogs, but that's where cataloging has not really kept up. And so in this case, this was a handy way to develop an annotated list. I could also use it for read-alikes. In this case, I asked it for read-alikes for The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, and it did a pretty good job. Now, these are kind of obvious read-alikes, but I think it's a good start. And then I could ask it to give me more. And if I used a tool other than ChatGPT-4, I could get more recent read-alikes. So these are getting better, but it's a very good starting point. In terms of cataloging, absolutely, you could use standard cataloging tools, and I would recommend them. But if you needed a quick record that may or may not be up to date, including like awards won and things like that, this is for Team of Rivals, and I got a very quick record using that. Certainly, there are probably better records than this, but It just wanted to kind of test it. I also use it to explore controlled vocabulary across various different thesauri. So it's possible I won't have the Mesh thesaurus available or the PsycInfo thesaurus immediately available or the ERIC thesaurus for education immediately available. But I was looking for material on ADHD, and I realized that the terms might look different across the disciplines. And so I was able to compare them and to make sure that as I do a search in, say, a discovery tool, it might be easier for me to find them if I saw the differences that different fields use for this. It's a great tool. These large language models can create glossaries and step-by-step instructions. In this case, I started with a list. It didn't give me enough of a glossary for my 530 class. And so I asked it to expand the vocabulary. And in this case, I asked it to reduce the text complexity of my glossary. Maybe it's not as good as the first one, and I certainly would edit the first one, but I just wanted to show you some of the ways you might use it in your own work. And this is a translation of the annotated book list that I showed you earlier. In this case, I asked a student of mine who spoke Ukrainian to evaluate it, and she said it wasn't bad. And so you really do want to make sure that these translations are accurate and reasonable. But in a pinch, I think this might be a very good tool to use. If you're working with students, it's important to know that these are really great ways to develop study tools. Here, I developed a list of flashcards for medical school anatomy classes. In this case, I looked at a Jeopardy game on Supreme Court decisions. In this case, I asked it for assessment options for a college environmental studies course. I asked for the assessments to be authentic, and I really love that it imagined that the students were in particular roles in their community. In one of them, the students were to analyze an environmental policy or regulation at the local, national, or international level and assess its effectiveness in addressing a targeted environmental issue. Students present policy analysis in a research paper, including evidence-based arguments. These are really better than I could think of in a million years. So I would absolutely customize this to meet the needs of my particular class, but it is a great start. Speaking of assessment ideas, in this case, I was looking for a business administration class on studies relating to leadership ethics, and it gave me 3 excellent examples. One case study on the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, another on the Volkswagen emissions scandal, and another on Uber's sexual harassment scandal. These are pretty good starting points. And I often use it to create analogies to explain topics that I think are difficult to understand. Now let's look at tools that were created specifically for instructional tasks. And again, there's a playlist of these, and some of my favorites are included on the petting zoo. Puripod is one that's used heavily already in schools. It generates lesson plans. It's as good as the content you put into it. And so in this case, I was looking at a 5th grade lesson on invasive species. I asked it to create interactive activities. I asked it for an exit ticket. I inputted my learning objectives. I asked it to pull from the next generation science standards, and it did a great job. And the lesson was created in the style of a presentation. Here's a closer look at it. And you can see the options in terms of the types of lessons that you can create. You can see the work together in pairs activity. You could see that it created a kind of did you know? And it really is a great time saver. And again, I wouldn't use it out of the box. I would customize it to meet the needs of my own students. This one doesn't use a presentation style. It creates a very traditional lesson plan, but it does an excellent job. Note that it has an agreement. This is called Schemely, and it has agreement with Quizlet, so it creates flashcards. It suggested great activities, things that look like fun for solving quadratic equations. And it also has it looks like it also has a relationship with Kahoot, the kind of gamified quiz tool. So take a look at that as well, Schemely. If you use backwards design and universal design for learning, you may want to create lessons with a tool called Frizzle AI. It, as it says, based on universal design for learning, or UDL, it creates multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means for action and expression. So this is another specialized tool for instructional design. And here is an example of the graduate course for, I think this is for our search course, and an idea for a lesson on AI. I'm kind of in love with Presto writing prompt. In this case, went back to my invasive species for 8th grade, and I asked it to create a writing prompt for my students. And noticed that the prompt could come in any number of forms: a news article, a story or personal narrative, an op-ed, which is the one I chose, sequence, cause and effect, compare and contrast, problem and solution, or description. And I love this op-ed. So in one of these cases, imagine you're an environmental scientist in charge of finding ways to stop the spread of an invasive species. How would you go about doing it? Describe a plan that would help prevent the spread of these species and explain why it could be successful. These, I think, are really engaging. This one is wonderful for differentiation and translating, and also scaffolding. It's called DIFIT. In this case, my example was explain Russia's war in the Ukraine using articles from the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. So it adapted the reading passage, it gave the sources, and it allowed me to add questions of my choice: basic comprehension, simple reasoning, strategic thinking, or extended thinking. And it allowed me to generate more content to build background knowledge. So this is just such an easy tool, and it only takes a few seconds to get some really great results. In addition, there are some Swiss Army knife tools. One of them is called Copilot. Notice that this instructional design tool allows you to build quizzes, lessons, generate ideas, writing prompts, suggestions for student reports, or actually, this will generate student reports for helping them understand their strengths and weaknesses, create handouts, create PowerPoints, discover and share real world benefits. So take a look at this. This is my example using this. In this case, I used the unit planner tool to create a unit on the Trail of Tears, which gave me a pretty good outline, which presented resources as well. And I could edit this and personalize it for my course and make it even better. But it was a great starting point. Some of these educational tools are developing, as we noticed, have developed partnerships with other people. This one called EDU GPT works with trained GPT bots. So the bots look like people, as you can see on the left. And these bots have specialties. They're first grade teachers, they're ninth grade social studies teachers, but they're also users of partner tools like Chegg and Canvas and Kahoot and Schoology and learning management systems like Google Classroom and Canvas. And so these folks know they're not folks, they're personas. They actually have learned how these tools operate, and will allow you to create content that works very seamlessly into these platforms. This one, I know I've been in love with a few of them, but I am absolutely in love with this kind of Swiss Army knife tool. Magic Tools, I met the educator who created this. Actually, I interacted with him in a webinar, but look at all the things that you can create here. Models and math stories and word problems and feedback tools and common misperceptions and vocabulary builders and text proofreaders. And in addition to some of the things we saw earlier, there's a chatbot that is helpful. In this case, I examined AI-resistant assignments, and I thought these were great. And I asked it to create AI-resistant assignments for a unit on the Gilded Age. And it showed me why these are AI resistant. They shift from focusing on mere regurgitation of facts to critical analysis and evaluation. And in that case, it's more AI resistant. And in one of them, it says instead of providing a list of questions for students to answer about the Gilded Age, create a simulation activity where students take on the role of a prominent figure from that era. This should engage them in virtual debate, discussing key economic, social, and political issues of the time, defending their position with historical evidence. I could see this taking the form of a dinner party with some of the major influential leaders of industry at that point. And it could be lots of fun and involve some costumes. And this is an example of a mobile app called Hello History, in which I had a conversation with somebody I read in high school and college, Albert Camus, and there's probably 100 historical figures. I don't think this is enough to use just having this conversation, but I think evaluating the conversation and thinking about what else Albert Camus might have said about something, using the text from the stranger might be, this might be just an innovative engagement activity for that. Let's move on to prompt crafting or refining your prompt. There are various different ways people have referred to ensuring that you create the best prompt so that you get the best results. There are a number of frameworks that people have created to help us envision the best types of prompts that we can make. I like this one from the AI classroom, which looks at the input and then the refinement of the output. It's called prep edit. So in the first part, you're prompting, you're introducing the question, you're giving it a role. I'm an AP history teacher, or I'm an LIS student. You're trying to be explicit in your instructions, giving it the details, and set the parameters of the answer. For instance, I'm writing a one-act play. And then you're editing the output. You're evaluating the content. You're determining its accuracy and corroborating the sources. You're identifying biases and misinformation, and then you're transforming the content to reflect the adjustments and the new findings. I like this because it deals with the before and after, but there are many other examples. Here's another one, and this one I think I created with going across the literature. Talk about the audience, the style and tone, the length, the structure for role playing, what type of genre or what you want, what format you want the output to take, the purpose, and expanding the content in terms of how you want ChatGPT or the other tools to address it. I love that Generation AI, this book has so many prompts, especially for educators. In fact, this one, it shows the variety of theorists that you might create educational prompts based on. This one talks about discussing, boosting discussion in your lessons using an approach used by Vygotsky. There's another one about boosting there's another one about boosting critical thinking in your lessons. And you throw in the lesson, the grade level, whatever it is you're looking for. And again, if you're a teacher, this one uses prompts inspired by Dewey to boost collaboration in your lessons. There are hundreds of those. This one is a lesson on prompt crafting or prompt engineering from Khan Academy. Showing you good, better, and best approaches in prompt crafting or engineering. And if you haven't seen Monica Burns' work on prompt crafting, she is somebody you must look at. This is just one of her lists. This is 7 quick ways teachers can save time with ChatGPT, but on our playlist, you will see one based on every type of teacher and various different instructional situations. So her work is a must-see, and I hope you take a chance to dig into it on the playlist. Prompting is not exclusive to text. You can do good, better, and better prompting using for images. You'll see that the ones that I used in this presentation didn't start out in the current format. I did quite a bit of prompting to get them as adorable as they might be to me anyway. So this one is on learning prompting for images, I think. And then we have new options in creating presentations. I think these are pretty amazing. So Slides GPT interacts, I believe, with Google Slides, and and this is just an example of one of their slide decks. This one, I believe, is Gamma, and Gamma has a kind of elegant approach, and I played around with creating this slide deck in Gamma. It did a great job, gave me some good ideas for how to organize, and I decided I wanted it to have more of my personality and didn't want to use the standard backgrounds that they created. I wanted to use my own art, so I abandoned this, but it was a really good start. Slides AI.io is another one that you might use. And this one, I believe, is Canva using Magic Design. There's so much great Magic Design. In this case, you describe the presentation and it will write and design a draft of your presentation instantly. The more and the better you prompt, the better it's going to be. I chose not to use this, but you can see it did some really good design. I would absolutely add my own resources and my own material. Never use something like this out of the box, but it is a good starting point. And you may want to discover or think about in what ways do you want to encourage or discourage people from using tools like this to outline. Canva not only has that magic relating to creating presentations, this is a list of the many apps that Canva now makes available across its design platform. And you can see text to image is one of the ones I love. The idea of coming up with presenters. If you're camera shy, you can have a presenter present your presentation in a variety of different optional voices. There is a way to remove backgrounds from images, ways to create bingo cards. Again, this is kind of like a Swiss Army knife for design, and it's gotten better and better with the addition of generative AI. This is just a closer look and maybe an option to look at a few more things that Canva Magic Design can do for you. Let's think about visual art. Again, this is an example of the art that I created for the petting zoo using Adobe Firefly. And why I like this one is because Adobe Firefly promises that it doesn't use proprietary art in its training models. That is important to note because the art community, and as most of the creative communities are getting especially concerned about what AI is training on, whether or not the products of AI are copyrighted, the competition of AI design with the design of human artists. And so in this particular slide, we're looking at a case that went in front of the Copyright Office that argued that some AI generated art can be trademarked. So we need to think about all these issues, and I think opening conversations with the students about what creativity means, what is creative, when is it more important to create from scratch on our own, looking at the arguments in the Screen Actors Guild strike would be important for our students as an important current events topic. So these things are not without issue, and in the world of art, particularly issue ridden. And we are still trying to figure out what creativity looks like, what originality looks like, and how should we reward creativity. This is just an example of how I use the text to image feature in Canva Magic Design to create an image of a librarian with curly reddish blondish hair, glasses, introducing a petting zoo of farm animals. And in this case, I used the cartoon style option. And so I think she's adorable. Uh, and that's one of your options. And this is just a closer look at Adobe Firefly. It has so many features, and it is now beginning to partner with some of the ChatGPT tool, with some of the large language models. If you look at the right side of the screen, you can see that there is a photograph of a winter's day, which the Adobe Firefly tool created I'm forgetting whether it went from, oh yes, it changed from a summer day to a winter's day. I think that is remarkable. And this is a shot of some of the tools within Adobe Firefly. I created an avocado riding an elephant standing next to a beautiful woman with reddish blondish curly hair. And that's what I got. But you can see that there is generative fill. So if you remove the background from an image, you can suggest a new background to be put there. There is a kind of cool text creation with images embedded inside the text, and many more options. What I like about this is it's free, and it respects copyright and the work of independent artists, and it uses images that it owns. And this is a tool called DALL-E, which I've used for a number of projects. In this case, I wanted it to create somebody to introduce the notion of these tools being starter dough. And I wanted my avatar creation in this to be created in the style of one of my favorite artists, Klimt. And DALL-E may be a little controversial for its use of artists' work. So think about that. This one is the MyHeritage AI time machine. I use MyHeritage for some DNA research, and when they introduced the option to create the AI time machine, in addition, they also have an avatar maker. I had a lot of fun with this, and you may want to use this, but recognize that if you're joining these things, you are giving them your information. I was already using that tool. You may want to be careful of what you're giving. This one is the group behind this is the Latter-day Saints. And so think about which you're signing up for and which you're not signing up for. Many of these you can try without registering or sharing information. And this is just another image tool called Lexica, in which I created bunnies on a coffee shop date and a female professor who I thought was going to look like me, but she doesn't. So now let's talk a little bit about the ethics behind generative AI in the classroom and in life in a larger sense. A definition of plagiarism is taking the intellectual or creative property done by someone else and passing it off as your own. So what does academic honesty look like right now in this environment? I think it's nuanced. I think we should not go into the fall school year or anything else without policies and guidelines for the work we're encouraging, especially for educators. So what should these conversations about academic integrity look like? I remember being fascinated by this book from 1958, which I probably read after 1958, called Danny Dunn and the Homework Machine. And it was about this wonderful invention in which Danny and his friends program the content of textbooks into their computers and have some success before the machine is sabotaged. He corrects the problem, and Danny's teacher also learns about the machine and gives a special challenge to the homework champions. And I think it all ended happily. I like that the illustration is by Esther Jack Keats. I didn't notice that before. But this is no longer science fiction. So I think that we should consider how we teach students to credit use of AI. I asked Microsoft Bing if it could give me a list of guidelines, and it did, and it gave me the sources. But here they are if you want to click on them for suggestions. And some of these are specifically on just citing ChatGPT and not generative AI. So you may want to adapt these for reference lists. There was an article that in the Chronicle of Higher Education that attracted an awful lot of attention in the spring. I'm a student, and you have no idea how much we're using ChatGPT. No professor or software could ever pick up on it. And this student said that people will worry that ChatGPT might eventually start rendering major institutions obsolete. It seems to me that it already has. And so we need to discover how to respond to its use. So we have to decide what is acceptable work for which assessment. I think that creating an AI policy for an entire school may be a challenge, because the tasks that are being done across the disciplines and across the grade levels will vary, same at a university. We need to make some suggestions to the people we work with. So is it acceptable, for instance, to use generative AI in brainstorming? I love the idea of being able to connect dots that I hadn't seen before. I think that's part of what innovation is. And sometimes generative AI can help me see dots that I wouldn't see in my general research. As I showed earlier, it helps you find lists of sources. Now, of course, that has to be evaluated, garbage in, garbage out. Summarizing my reading content when it's not essential for me to read the too long, didn't read it kind of approach. Summarizing research for my sources for summarizing source research, summarizing video content for probably a long workshop like this. Is it okay for outlining, for use in spelling and grammar checking, for paraphrasing content, for editing my writing, for citation support, for helping me generate thesis statements, for creating rough drafts? So these all may be appropriate at different times, and those of us who are educators may need to make some decisions. Here are a list of documentation styles that relate to the use of generative AI in student work. And although I would absolutely warn you about the strong possibility of false positive, these are a list of tools for detecting AI in student writing. Tools is Turnitin. And I think it's important to note that Turnitin it claims to be getting very good about false positives. And one of the things I want to point to is the number of learning resources that it includes in its platform. And I believe these are all available for free, even if you're not a subscriber. Khan Academy also has some great practical suggestions to mitigate non-learning and cheating. Again, its resources, its modules for educators and adults using generative AI with young people are really wonderful. And then on the playlists and also on the petting zoo, you'll find a curated list, or many curated lists, of policy statements and guidelines for use of generative AI. Among them, one that I like best is, if you're going to create one for a large group of a large learning population, the International Baccalaureate School has a really forward-thinking statement. The IB believes that artificial intelligence technology will become part of their everyday lives, like spell checkers, translation software, and calculators. We therefore need to adapt and transform our educational programs and assessment practices so that students can use these AI tools ethically and effectively. The IB is not going to ban the use of such software, but will work with schools to help them support their students on how to use these tools ethically in line with our principles of academic integrity. And so take a good look at this. I really like it, but that's not the only one. One of the things that I am encouraging for my classes is reflection. And on the bottom of these statements for 575 and 530, you'll see I want students to acknowledge how they've used AI. And because we're working and learning more about the information landscape as information professionals, I think it's really important that we test drive all of these things and that we know how the people we work with are going to be using them, or how we can introduce productive tools for our clients and patrons and students. But as I think we should model also. So I want to know, if you're in my class, which tools did you use? How were they used? What were your prompts and refinements? In what ways and to what degree the tools supported or did not support your efforts, and what you learned as a result of the process. So I think this notion of reflection in terms of assessments could be really important. This is for AI. This is AI. This is the statement that I used in 530, Search in the Information Landscape. It's similar, but I think it's even more about exploration, so it's a slightly different at the beginning. And I think it's really important to recognize that each course will look different and may require different guidelines. I really love Lance Eaton's collaboratively written document on classroom policies for AI generative tools. And so people have contributed from all over the education landscape. And just among those people are people who've contributed in the area of data and computer science, in the world of education, history, advanced legal writing, business, and on. And so I know this has been a very long presentation, but I encourage you to take some time and play with some of the tools. You are going to be an information professional, and it's really important that you become a leader in this area, that you are sitting at the table when policies are being developed, that you are working with teachers, if you are a school librarian or an academic librarian, to help them develop policies, and that you promote yourself as a true leader in this environment. It's going to get more and more nuanced and more complicated. Be part of this world and go out there and be an info pro.